Hey VC, it's Brad Vinyl Guy here. Thought I'd give you a quick update on some of the stuff I've bought over the internet over the last 2 or 3 weeks. Hope you're all doing okay. Thank you very much for new subscribers and old subscribers alike, and thanks for tuning in. We'll start off with a group called Beavis and Butthead, and this album's called Inner Marshland, and this is a 2015 repress of an album that came out in 1987. And it's got 9 extra tracks on here, so a really nice one to have as a double album. And some really nice artwork on the front of this one as well. The artwork was done by a chap called Cy Bancroft, who's done a few of the Beavis and Butthead albums, and is a saxophonist apparently. Now the Beavis and Butthead, if you don't know, are sort of a neo-psychedelic psychedelic rock band. Mainly done by a chap called Nick Solomon. He's the sort of guy who does most of the work on his own, multi-instrumentalist. And he's been quite prolific over the last, I don't know what, 20 years, 25 years in terms of how much stuff he's put out. He started off making music in the late 60s at college, and then in the 70s he made an album with a group called Odd Socks. And then he had a motorcycle accident in the 80s. From compensation money he bought a 4-track recorder and started making some more stuff that he wanted to make, according to him, in the style of Hendrix, Vipers, Birds, that kind of style. And he's made some fantastic albums since then. This was the second album he put out. I've got 3 or 4 of his albums on vinyl that are all really good. And there's a lot of really long psychedelic guitar solos, which isn't always my cup of tea, but he's so good at it that it's always worth listening to. Some of his tracks are 20 minutes long, but still good for it. And yeah, someone that I really like, the Beavis and Butthead, Inner Marshland, really good album, this one. It did come out again in 2016 as a Record Store Day release, but just a single album and some extra tracks that you could download. But that one was good to have because it's, like I said, it's got a double album with 9 extra tracks on it. Next up, this is a really good one that I was really pleased to get. It's Bon Scott, Seasons of Change, 1968 to 1972, and this is Bon Scott pre-AC/DC days, as you can probably tell from the pictures, when he was in 2 other groups. Again, you'll see down here the Valentines and Fraternity. This is the Valentines here, and they were like a pop bubblegum group from the late 60s in Australia. And then the other group here, the Fraternity, who were kind of a rock, blues rock group from the early 70s. And this is a split LP between those 2 groups. First side is the Valentines between 68 and 70, second side Fraternity from 70 to 72. And there's also an interview with Bon Scott on here as well at the end of side 1. Yeah, really good. Picked it up for £15 including shipping, and yeah, an Australian pressing that one, so again, really good to have, and obviously the rest is history after us in those 2 groups. Next up we've got The Distractions. They're a group from Manchester who sort of got going in the 70s, and they were kind of punk, post-punk, made an album back then. This one came out some 32 years later, 32 years later, in 2012 I think this one, on Occultation Recordings. And they're, yeah, post-punk, indie, 60s influence slightly, but really very listenable. I think if you're into that genre of music, you'd really, really like them. And included in the band was Mike Kelly, who was in Spooky Tooth and The Only Ones. And he sadly passed away earlier this year. But yeah, nice album, The Distractions and The End of the Pier. Okay, so with this one, I just have to show you the sleeve, I think, and you're going to know what sort of music it's going to be without me saying too much. Look at that, it's got to be Psychobilly, hasn't it, really? And this is Kemp, Go Psycho. Fantastic sleeve. It's kind of like a poster sleeve, if you like. I'll just show you quickly what it looks like. Record sort of fits in there. There's the back. And they're a French psychobilly group. I think they've been going since about 1986. They're from Toul in France. And I think this is the first album they've put out on vinyl that came out in 2015 on Diablo Records. And this is on red vinyl with a bit of black swirl in it as well. And this is a limited edition of 100 copies. And I've got number 30 of 100 here. I don't know if you can see that on there. And it also came out on black vinyl as well. I think that was limited to maybe 250 as well. But yeah, breakneck psychobilly. Some of it in French, some of it sung in English. But really, really good album, and it's nice to have a limited edition of that one. Next we've got Tomorrow, self-titled album from 1968. This is a Record Store Day re-release from, I think it was from last year. I just picked it up a couple of weeks ago on the internet though. And Tomorrow were a psychedelic group from the late 60s, one of the first English psych groups, up there with Pink Floyd. They were kind of championed by John Peel in their early days. They did a session for him of 3 songs in 1967 that he played on his Perfume Garden radio show. But in terms of, and critically acclaimed as well, but in terms of record sales, they never did very well. And I think it's kind of in recent years that people have sort of come to recognise it as being as good as it is. Again, great artwork on the cover. Steve Howe was in here, went on to be in Yes. And Twink, who was the drummer, he went on to be in The Pretty Things. And also played with the Beavis that I mentioned earlier as well. Yeah, so psych pop rock, really great album. And with it being a Record Store Day release, came on this really rather attractive looking vinyl on Parlophone. So nice to have it on Parlophone and nice colours there as well. But fantastic album. Some of it pop, some psych, some whimsical. I mean, there's a song on here. Let's see, just trying to find the 3 Jolly Little Dwarfs. Very whimsical, but quite amusing. Okay, and talking of the Pretty Things, as I was then, and Twink. SF Sorrow, probably their most critically acclaimed album in recent times. Not always that way, I'll go into that in a second. But again, this is a recent repress. I did see this in Manchester. I mentioned in one of my previous videos about when I went to a record shop in Manchester and bought a few things there. This was their 1987 Edsel repress of this one being originally from 1968. But it wasn't in great condition in terms of the record. Sleeve was good, but some marks on the record, and for 25 quid I thought I could probably do better elsewhere. I wasn't precious about having an early pressing, and that certainly wasn't an early pressing. But I managed to pick this one up for about 15 quid, so I'm happy with that. Artwork done by the lead singer, because there was a shortage in the budget apparently. But yeah, a lot to say really about this album if you don't already know it. I know a lot of you already know the album. Not well received when it came out. The producer was the in-house producer for EMI, and he was very supportive towards the band and the group, but it wasn't really promoted very well by EMI. Likewise, it was picked up by Rare Earth, Motown's rock label, when it was picked up for American market, and was mastered quite badly. Plus they put it in the dome sleeve, which you've all probably known and seen, and probably some of you will have it. And so it kind of got lost within the other records in the racks there as well, so none of that helped towards the sales. And when it was reviewed in America, it was reviewed quite negatively by Rolling Stone, because by the time it came out in America, it was after Tommy by The Who had come out, and they said it was a pale imitation of that. In actual fact, it had been made before then, and sadly didn't get out in America till after that. But it's a really great album for those who don't know it. Again, psychedelic, psych pop, and it's a shame that it didn't hit the big time until now, but at least it's being recognised now. I suppose that's something. Next up we've got Bleached, and this is called Welcome the Worms. 3-piece from Los Angeles, as you can see from the front of here, all-female punk band. Towards the more poppy side of punk, but I wouldn't say pop punk. Great melodies, songs with attitude, which I like. You know, they sound like they mean it, which is always a good thing. And I think possibly Will the Vinyl Potato might have shown this one as being one of his favourite albums of last year. Certainly one of my favourite albums of last year too. Bleached and Welcome the Worms. I think this was their second album. Not heard the first one, but I need to check that one out. Okay, next a nice one, a really nice package, this one, as well as being a good album. It's the Beach Boys, plus also a Various Artists album as well. It's a double pack, 180 gram vinyl, beautifully packaged. You'll see Beach Boys, Rise of the Surf Movement featuring John and Dean Digdale and the Deltones. This one came out last year. I'll just show you the inside of this one as well, because it's got a really nice picture of the Beach Boys. I hope you can see that okay. Track listings up there and some linear notes as well. And that's the back of it. Now this one essentially is the Beach Boys' first album, Surfing Safari, on the first disc. And the second disc is like a Various Artists of Surf. So you've got Dick Dale and Deltone, Surf Beat, the Ventures, the Ramrods, John and Dean, the Lively Ones, High Voltage by Johnny and the Hurricanes. But beautifully packaged, like I said. It comes with, I mean, I picked that up for about £11, so it's a double album. Comes with the CD, which inserts into the middle picture there. It also comes with a download code, with a picture of the band on it, and an Obi as well, Obi strip. So great package for £11, and essentially, like I said, the Beach Boys' first album, which I didn't have, plus a load of various artists. Next up, we've got R.L. Burnside. This one's been shown a couple of times recently in the VC. Ass Pocket of Whiskey. Blues. Sort of along the way, I sort of say, really powerful voice. He's got raspy lyrics. He's quite a character, R.L. Burnside. He was born in the mid-20s. Been making music and playing blues with a lot of major blues artists, well, since he was old enough to play the guitar, about 16 I think he was on stage from. But he only really hit it big in the late 80s and early 90s. So a highly recommended one, this one. And I know he's got a big family. I think he had about 13 children, masses of grandchildren, great-grandchildren who are still making music these days. He died a few years ago now, and he was inducted into the Blues Hall of Fame in Memphis. He's made some fine albums in the 80s and 90s and beyond. And this was made with the John Spencer Blues Explosion backing him up, a band that I know from the late 80s as well, who've made some great stuff. So yeah, I know people have shown this recently and said a lot more than I could about him, but yeah, really good album. Picked this one up from Discogs. Susie and the Banshee is one of their later albums from 1991. This is their 10th studio album, produced by Stephen Hague, who's produced New Order, Pet Shop Boys, amongst many others. And I understand Susie wasn't overly pleased about the production in terms of it. She felt it was a bit clean and computerised. And it's quite an exotic sounding album, quite laid back, very clear in its production. You'll probably know the lead single Kiss Them For Me, which was a big hit. Beautiful sleeve, a great picture of Susie. I mean, it's unmistakably Susie in terms of the vocals, obviously. And Steve Severin and Budgie were still in the band at this time. But yeah, really, really good album of their latest stuff, I would say. And I think this was their biggest selling album in America, which is interesting considering some of the other stuff that's come out previously by Susie and the Banshees. But yeah, it's a really nice album if you don't know it particularly well. And many of you won't do, because I suppose a lot of us have the earlier stuff, and I've come to this one quite late as well. Okay, quite an obvious one next, and an album that I probably should have bought years ago, is the Kinks' first album. And this is a recent repress, I think 2014 or 15 on coloured vinyl. There's not a lot I can say about this really. Like most bands, British bands at the time, they were into the R&B side of things. So there's covers of Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley songs, if you don't know the album, as well as Stop Your Sobbing, which is one of my favourite Kinks songs of the early stuff, obviously covered by the Pretenders and many others. And You Really Got Me's on here as well. But it was knocked when it came out, and subsequently for sort of weak covers of the R&B songs, but I think they stand up pretty well. It's an album that I've always liked and I've got round to buying. So the Kinks' first album from 1964. Next up, MGMT. Again, another album that many of you will probably know. This is their first album, Oracular Spectacular, and this came out in 2007. A band that were formed in 2002 in Connecticut, comprising of this duo. They made a couple of albums since, but this is always clearly my favourite by quite a long way. And they had big hits from this one: Time to Pretend, Kids, Electric Feel. They were the big hits from this one. And they're kind of, again, neo-psychedelic, quite sort of poppy in places, heavy on the keyboard arrangements. Very well received when it came out, and I think it's one of those albums that's in the 1001 albums you've got to hear before you die book. And it is a really great album, MGMT. Oracular Spectacular. Final one from me on this video is this one. Well, it's March, so let's have a Christmas album, why not? It's Low Christmas, and this is an album that came out on Sub Pop originally in 1999. I think this repress is from about 2009. And this is a Christmas album, obviously, going from the sleeve and the title. And it's kind of indie slowcore, slow tempo. A couple of Christmas songs on here. Blue Christmas, Silent Night, Little Drummer Boy, but done in a really sort of indie slowcore style with some really nice harmonies. And yeah, really good one to listen to, and a really good indie Christmas album, I will say, if you're looking for one of those, which probably most of you aren't, but a good one to have in that genre. So that's it from me. Thanks very much for watching. Again, thank you for all the subscribers who've come to me recently, and all subscribers who are watching, and people who just watch because they've come across the video. I've got some more new ones to show that I'll make a new video for in the next few days. Leave a comment if you've got anything to say about anything that I've shown, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you very much. Cheers.